We're live. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. And sorry we're a little bit late today, we had tech issues. But joining us today on the Apollo Moon anniversary as well, coincidentally, we didn't plan this, is Candy Torres. And Candy will talk to us about her career as a engineer working with the space program. So let's jump right in the way we usually do. So, Candy, the day after you graduated, you walked into a job at Princeton University working on the Copernicus satellite. Can you tell us how you used your skills as an engineer to problem solve on the job?
Yes, well, you had to, what I did basically in the astrophysics department was I was responsible for verifying the data from the satellite. Now, this was the Orbiting Astronomical Observatory, also known as Copernicus. It happened to be the very first successful space observatory. We had astrophysicists from around the world who had experiments that were using this satellite. And the data would come down, and there was no pictures. This was not like Hubble. This was just data. So it had the spectral analysis of the different stars or nebulae, a lot of different things that these astrophysicists were interested in. So I had to verify the data that that the experiment had operated properly. So I had to know about ultraviolet, and I had to know the data, and sometimes I did catch a problem and have to tell them something went wrong with your experiment, and they would have to do something. One guy was very creative with it. The other thing was I had to do a report 4 times a year. And I had to collect the data from this satellite project because NASA wanted to know how many astrophysicists had used the satellite, what kinds of experiments, what kind of data. And I would get it on these literally reams of computer printout. You know, remember the long ones with that just connected? It would take literally 3 weeks. It was very tedious work because there's all those little numbers, little different codes. This represented this astrophysicist, this represented this experiment for that astrophysicist, and so on. And but it was all scattered throughout. It wasn't organized. So I had to organize. So I had to look for all this information and then type it into, a computer and put this report together for NASA. Well, that's very boring work. It took me 3 weeks to go through to do this report. And I thought, man, I don't like being bored. So what else can I do? Well, number one, it's on a computer because it's on a computer printout. So if I can access this data, and if I could write a program that would read this data, then I might be able to save myself time. And I had one course in computer programming because it wasn't computer science. We didn't have all those degrees. I just had one course, and I didn't really understand everything, but I learned Fortran. So I worked with a coworker. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to go through this data. And because I had been doing this manually, I could take this language, this Fortran language, really didn't make sense to me how to use this. But I could say, when I saw this, I would do this. There was all these different exceptions and things I had to process when I did it by hand. Then all of a sudden it made sense. If this, then that, and light bulb went off. But what was even better was once I finished writing the program to take this box of cards, because I had to choose what format this data should be in, the easiest to bring it over to the computer center, because we didn't have computers in the buildings at that time. It was the big mainframe. So I decided on cards, and I trucked my cards over there, ran my computer, and poof, out came this printout with everything organized. And then, is that what computers can do? And after that, I was literally looking for any opportunity to use computers. I went way beyond, anything that was necessary. Way ahead of everybody in the department. My boss, who had been doing this process for 4 years the same way. Well, it didn't take me 4 years to wait until, I got to do something different. So that was the start of my computer career.
Yeah, and it's a good point. It's amazing how much we take for granted now.
So that was just the report. And then I also had to process the data for the astrophysicists around the world and help them. Does that make sense to you about what I was doing in terms of the work? So there was two things I've mentioned. I mentioned verifying the data and sending it out to astrophysicists, and also the report that I had to do. And once I established that thinking process and seeing what computers can do, now I had a tool. How many different ways can I use this tool?
So you actually went on to do software engineering for the Johnson Space Center and the International Space Station. So you've mentioned a little bit, obviously, early days of computer was very different to today. So can you tell us how you went about your working on Space Shuttle software engineering?
Sure. From working at Princeton, we had, as I said, the mainframe computer, but as I worked there, computers were starting to get a little smaller. So we had the mid-frame computers, and actually, as I said, I had developed skills. I actually became the system administrator. Well, all that experience, without a degree in computer science, was, because it was scientific programming, was what helped get me the job at the Johnson Space Center. And that was after working at Princeton for over 7 years. I got a job working in mission control, and I'm wearing my, I don't know if you can see my MOD, but that's Mission Operations Directorate, and that is the operations of space operations of, at that time, the Space Shuttle. And it was all the consoles. You had data that would appear on these consoles for the flight controllers. I was not a flight controller. We were bringing in, it was with a team that would bring in the computer expertise. Now at that time, we had, as I said, now we're in the mid-range computer phase. But we did not have computers in the mission. It was actually called Mission Operations Control Room. It's a different, we have acronyms. It was called MOCR, and eventually became Mission Control Center. So I'll just use Mission Control Center. We would bring in these mid-frame computers, and we would show the flight controllers, the engineers, how to use them, because they had their data. Remember talking about those reams of data? They were still using that in terms of books, these big, thick books of diagrams, very crude by current standards. And they would trace through a problem. They would see data and say there was an issue on the space shuttle, and they would go flipping through their book and then find and then trace through by hand. Literally, I'm using my hand, my finger, because that's literally the way they would find the solution to the problem, where our software was doing all that for them. And so we had to work with them, learn their job process, and teach them. But they were very skeptical. They did not understand what programmers did. So we couldn't even use the word programmer because we were looked down upon. And then eventually they came, literally, we were sitting there, what should we be called? And the company, the bosses came up with software engineer. Because engineer, they could relate to that.
Why was programmer such a stigmatized word, do you think?
They had no clue. Remember, everything was done by hand. They had their particular way of doing things.
Yeah.
So what is this programming thing?
They were programmed not to understand what programming was, I guess.
Right. It was new. It was just something new. You know, totally new. They'd never seen it. You know, computers were not accessible. They weren't personal.
Yeah.
So you really had to have special permission to use the computers and special knowledge.
Yeah.
And they were there to sit and work in the control center.
Yeah. So what was it like being the only female in that team? Because we know that research shows that the whole masculine culture of engineering courses leads women to drop out. When you were at university, you were only one of 10 women in your aerospace engineering classes. How did you manage this male-dominated culture at that time?
Well, as an undergraduate, as I said, it was in aerospace engineering, and yes, it was less than 10. It was about 7 of us, but it was hundreds of young men taking these engineering classes.
Yeah.
And I never got to see any of the other women. and I felt very isolated. I never had anybody. It was a big campus. Rutgers University was a very big campus. So I went to Douglas College, which is a women's college, but Rutgers had Rutgers College, Douglas College, Livingston College, Cook College. So there were different colleges. So even though I was at Douglas, I could take courses at any of these, and they happened to be at the engineering college, which was on the other. It was far away on the other side of town. I didn't know how to deal with the environment. No one would come up and talk with me. I had no one to study with. I thought differently about things. When we came to designing something, I could figure out how to design something and do the drawings and things like that. But I needed more help with the other projects, the other courses, and there was no one for me to talk to or get help from. And so that was very difficult. So I had to make a decision about that. Is this going to work out for me? And I decided that I had to find another way. And fortunately, by being at a women's college, it actually had opportunities that I wasn't aware of.
Such as? Like what?
Not very many people know about individual major, but I've recently found a couple people who know what that is, and that's where you have the option of creating your own courses so you can get a degree. And so I dropped out of engineering and developed an individual major, and I just went through all the catalogs. Like I said, I could go to all the different colleges, any course throughout Rutgers, and I would find anything that was space related, because that was my goal.
Yeah.
My goal, work in space. So it was all these science courses that I found. So I had astronomy, 2 semesters. I had astrophysics, about a semester, and physics, and the computer programming course. So I put it all together. No one helped me.
Yeah.
I just figured it out.
So the university guidance counselors or anything like that, they weren't helpful?
They supported me.
Okay.
But I knew in my heart what I wanted to do was work in the space program, and all I knew was if I took courses that were related to space, because at that time there were astronauts, we weren't studying to be astronauts or working in the space program. You just had degrees in different things. So I had to figure out, well, what will work for me here at this university. So I put all these courses together, and it just turned out. And then I had to find an advisor. He wasn't an advisor. He just signed off on it. I had done all the work, so I never had to go see him again. But I took all the courses, and it's just all this following your instinct, feeling this is what I needed to do. And it just so happens that one of the astronomy professors who was not at Rutgers, who was actually at Princeton, was a visiting professor. And then it was 3 years later that I always talk about what your passion is, and always follow your heart, because that's where you're going to get to go. People will help you. And he was one of them. When I went to talk to him, he said, "I remember you. You used to want to talk about working in the space program." And I didn't even remember the conversations because I did it all the time, but he knew the guy who was doing the hiring for that satellite job, and he said, "I'll be your reference." I don't think I knew what it was. So I never had to do a job search. I didn't even have a resume. I had taken the right course 3 years ago. All the other courses helped too, because the job listing said astronomy or astrophysics or physics or computers. I had it all. I had picked all the right courses.
Yeah.
It does show the power of networks as well, how important it is to get out there and talk to people, as you say, about your passion.
Yes, that has been the most important thing to do, because that's how you just tell people, and it comes out, because that's how I got down at Johnson Space Center. I wasn't even looking there originally, and I didn't get the first job, but I told the guy to please pass my resume around, and he did. He didn't have to do that in the company. He passed it around, and I got a phone call, and I talked to the guy about the job, and so we never even got to meet. It was just over the phone, because I'd already been down there once. They weren't going to send me down again, and he called, and I got the job offer, and zoom, I was down in Houston from New Jersey, and it was great. It really was.
So you were really a trailblazer in this area, because back, in the 70s, there weren't really any famous women astronauts, but you were actually at Sally Ride's historic launch in Florida. And although there's more women astronauts around now, we still have an image problem, I think, generally in science and in STEM, but certainly in when people think of astronauts or space exploration or astrophysics or physics, they don't really think of women. So how can we change the public perception of women in this area?
What I suggest, and this is what I do, is that we don't have to have someone with something which can sound as intimidating as astrophysicist or astronaut or anything. We need those. We need these high goals, but we need everybody else in between, because the astronauts themselves will say, without all these tens of thousands of people doing their jobs, we wouldn't be able to go out into space. And there need to be more voices such as mine which show the diversity of the work. I didn't invent anything, I didn't design anything, but I contributed to the space industry, to space history. I was part of it. My name will never be in any little book of all the people that, did major things in that, but yet it was important. It it changed how we worked. And so that's what we need. So I encourage people to talk more, and I have tried this, and it is very hard to get women to talk about themselves. I met a woman, and it's a really important story. It's very short. She told me how she had worked on the lunar lander, the design of the lunar lander. I'm in awe of this. And yet when I wanted to do an article about her work, she said, "Oh, I don't have anything to say. I didn't do anything, really interesting." I went, "What?"
Why do you think that is?
Women in general, because I approached a lot of women saying, "I'll write, you're looking for a job, let me write an article for you, it would help you." And they'd say, "Oh, well, it wasn't interesting. Women put themselves down. We still tend to do. I mean, all of us, we don't realize that we do that. We don't think we're good enough. And maybe I had just a little bit of, I'm good enough."
Yeah. So, you've talked before about how your parents were born in Puerto Rico and you faced some stigma growing up due to your cultural background. How do you think we can better support Latin youth and youth from other minority cultures to become involved in STEM? How do we prevent that exclusion from holding people back?
I've worked on a number of different programs. For instance, is Hispanic Forum, where they have all the students meeting people working in different industries. And what happens is we're so family-oriented and community-oriented. And I've had somebody in Newark, I went to talk to them, they were saying they face the same problem, especially with women, that their families don't want them to go out into the world. They want to keep them close to home, find a job close to home. And so that's one aspect. And when I did this Hispanic Forum is what I was talking about, I was a panelist, and I was right there in front of me where the parent was talking to the child, and I was telling the parent, encourage your child to do this job, to follow her passion. And so the parents have to feel that they're part of it, but they have to understand it. And that's part of what growing up is, that I would hear, it's just people just don't understand. It's something totally new to them. They can't visualize, so they just go with what they're comfortable with.
I think what you just said about making parents and probably their local communities involved is a really good one. I'm just thinking of, we had another engineer, we spoke to Annika O'Brien a few weeks ago, and she works a lot with local communities, not just with the with Latino kids, but with the community itself. And I think what you're saying really resonates. I think particularly with minorities, because it's not just about, because obviously I'm from Latin background as well. It's not just Latin people being backwards or anti-science, that protection comes from being a minority. You know, you want to protect your kids because they're a minority, and so getting parents involved, I think, in science and getting local communities involved is a really good way of helping inclusion.
Right. We can teach basic science, what science is, what the job opportunities are. And I've tried this with another family too. I gave this kid wanted to his family was from El Salvador, and his father they had escaped, and the father was a janitor, and the young boy and I would just hit it off, and he was interested in computers. And I gave him an old computer, but they moved away, so I wasn't able to help him with it. And unfortunately, I learned later on, because I ran into him a few years later when he'd grown up, he'd dropped out of school and got married. And it broke my heart, because I was trying so much. He knew that I did this, and I could see the love that he had for this. But for whatever reason, I'm not blaming his father. I know his father would take him to work, but something else was missing, you know, in the school environment and whatever else. That to this day, I mean, it really broke my heart. I mean,
yeah, maybe like a really positive science teacher who encouraged them when they were feeling down, or something really small and insignificant in the course of things. Maybe in that school teacher's, you know, day in the life of, it's no big deal, but these things can have a huge impact.
Right. I think also mentors, you know, Candy, you were there to act as a mentor, not just telling him science is exciting, but like as a role model. I've got a job in science, and here's what you can do.
Right.
I think matching minority youth and youth in general with STEM mentors, as you say, who come from diverse backgrounds doing diverse jobs, would probably help.
Yeah.
Yes, because to help the parents understand and to know when the kid doesn't even know how to express what's going on, to be able to read it because you've been there. You know what it feels like. That hand that comes, that hand that says, here, let me help you.
Yeah.
And if there's not enough people around you who have jobs in science, I think as well, if you're from a migrant background, your parents want you to succeed, but they want to be able to, they need to be able to see a career path. And if you've never seen other people go through it, then it's really hard to support your kid to do something that's alien to you.
I think that's a really good word, alien. It is. And that's what I grew up with. It's not that my parents helped me and my father certainly helped me when I wanted to learn how to fly an airplane. He'd take me to the airport. I was in Civil Air Patrol. So I learned to fly an airplane before I learned to drive a car. His dreams didn't come true, but it had nothing to do with his abilities.
Yeah.
He had other life things going on. So, and my mother was just protective, and because her dreams didn't come true either, but she became a mother. She said, we didn't think about those things. We just, once she became a mother, that was pretty much it. Yeah. But she still couldn't relate, and she would say, well, take steno and typing, so at least you can get a job if you can't get one in science.
Yeah. It's not really about ability, it's more about opportunity to do that. And I think by showing parents that, there are job opportunities in science. Let's not talk about the lack of funding for science jobs. That's a separate rant. Right. But, parents can envision, what are you going to do with a degree in software engineering? Well, there's plenty of people, look, they have something to show for it.
Yeah, connecting, this is what I want to do, and I was a teacher for a while too, and a student might have a goal but didn't know how to figure out how to get there, whereas I'll figure out a way. If I want to get somewhere, I will figure out a way of getting there. But not everyone has that ability. So that's the other thing, is not just the STEM career, the science and all that, but how to problem solve anything, any situation. And encouragement. If you want to get there, it's going to be up to you. I'll help you if I can.
Yeah, you can't handhold someone through. You can't do their STEM career for them. All you can do is show them what they can do and give them the tools to make it happen for themselves.
Right, and that you can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it.
It's also, though, as you say, I think one of the things that I wish a lot of people understood is the problem solving, as you say, and like you gave a really good example where, you know, you were a pioneer in many ways because you took you put together a course, a degree for yourself, but you used your skills and learning from different subjects to help you in a completely new area that hadn't been forged before you. And I don't think people realize that that's what a science degree gives you, is the ability to problem solve and to use those skills in new ways.
And it starts early on, is because we're always curious. I remember being curious about anything, that how does this put together? There was no one telling me. I was just, that's the natural curiosity we have as children. And then it gets, you know, well, this is how things are done in the world. And so then that slowly gets cut off. So we have to encourage experiment, try this, play around with this.
Yeah. And yeah, that's something that's come up with some of our previous hangouts. We did a conversation about parenting, and we talked about how STEM and science, it's not just a 9-to-5 job, it's really a way of life, it's a way of thinking, it's a, you know, it's something that infuses you all the way through.
Yes, everything needs to, there are problems every day that need to be solved. And it's that analytical ability and questioning. We have to ask questions. We're afraid to ask questions. All of that are the basis of life, to have a good life. And then you build on with getting into the sciences and everything else.
So, Candy, you mentioned that you were primarily at the beginning based at an old women's college. Do you think that that environment, being in an all woman environment, helped you in your STEM career? And do you see a place today for women-only colleges?
You hit an excellent point, because not just from my own personal perspective, because yes, they were the women counselors were there to support me in, okay, you want to do an individual major. Now they didn't know how to help me find it, but they were supportive of that. But also, my father died when I was a freshman in college, so I was about to fail and drop out, and they wouldn't let that happen. So they encouraged me to stay in school, and also to put me in organizations, encouraged me to join organizations, and put me in leadership roles. And so I became president of the commuter council, and so they were there to help me. They wouldn't let me fall. And the reason why I said it's a good point, because I just read the other day about women's colleges. I don't remember who sent it to me recently, but seeing the need for women's colleges. I heard some younger people said, oh, we don't need those anymore. And then just yesterday, the day before, yes, this is what women's colleges do for you. It gives you the opportunity, because you're forced into, it's all women, you're forced into leadership roles, because again, we learn too early in life to hold back, to not step forward. And here you're in a situation, well, and men will do that. They'll just step forward and will hold back. So women's colleges are still needed, and they're wonderful places. And I really am grateful for attending Douglas College.
And as you say, there's that other style of leadership that's often penalised, which is about noticing that people need support and encouraging them. You know, that it's not exclusive to women, but it's certainly a feminised or feminine way of leadership, and it's not often recognised, but as you say, it's invaluable, particularly when students are going through a really rough time, or when they need to go into innovative fields like you did.
That's right. We need to help each other, and unfortunately, there's also a component where, and I've seen this happen, where women won't necessarily help each other. So we can't be guaranteed that women will stick together and support each other. And I think talking about the Latino culture, for myself, and I spoke to a young woman in the STEM field, and we were in the same group, and we just thought there were just some very strange things in the group we worked with. But our values were different. Our values were community. Our values were help each other. Our values, and we're going, what's up with that? So even those are the things that we bring into the work environment.
Mm.
Because there's a lot of things that need to be helped. You can have a degree, but there's a lot more that goes on in the work
Yeah.
environment that need to be
Mm.
taken care of, and we need to understand.
And
Mm.
STEM is a team sport, you know, it's collaborative.
Mm.
Many of the really important stuff that happens, it's always a team that works cohesively together. I mean, the space program is the best example of that. It's not one person. Sure, it's, you know, one person that steps on the moon first, but there's so much more, you know, behind the scenes going on. It's a team that makes it happen.
That's right. And I'm going to take that line for today's date. Gene Kranz was in mission control on the day that we had the Apollo 11 lunar landing. Gene Kranz was my boss at NASA, not my direct boss, but he was just one step above. And I have pictures of him looking at our software. So commemorating today the Apollo 11, we know about him from Apollo 13. Well, that was my boss.
Yeah.
He got to see our software. But anyway, I had to just add that importance because he believed in teamwork.
Yeah.
He would never talk about himself. It was always team. His team did it.
Yeah. You'll have to share those pictures with us sometime.
Oh, I have lots of them. And now they're historic photographs because people weren't taking these pictures.
Yeah. So we're pretty much up on the 30-minute mark for our hangout. And thank you everyone for watching. Candy, did you have any comments you wanted to add before we say goodbye?
Well, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to share my love of STEM, of space exploration. It never leaves my heart because I thought at this point in my life I would be getting ready to retire on a lunar colony. I really did, and I'm not the only one that believed that because that was the future we had at that time.
Yeah.
Always think about the future and plan for it.
Thank you so much for joining us. And next week we'll be talking to Gabriella from the Biophysical Society about opportunities for women that it creates. So we'll create the event like we always do and share it out through our page. Thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.